We're going to now bring in Chris Swecker, former assistant FBI director. Sir, your thoughts on this horrible tragedy?
Yeah, beyond tragic. I mean, this is not the first time we've seen someone target the most vulnerable of our population, as Trey Gowdy pointed out, our children, young children. I do school security assessments and church security assessments, and your worst nightmare is the point in the day when, if there is one, where they're all gathered in one place. Because if they're in their classrooms, they can be sealed off, preferably, ideally with one push of an access control button, you can lock them down. But in a situation like this, they are extremely vulnerable. And it appears that this person came from around the side of the building to fire in from the side, which gives him the best field of fire, if you will, which is, again, it takes a special kind of evil to do this sort of thing. I packed off or watched my 9 grandkids go off to school on Monday, and this is your worst nightmare as a parent, and we pray for those families. But this is, another one of those situations where we're going to look back and see if there's any way this incident could have been prevented with perhaps an armed security guard out front or nearby. That's what I always recommend in my security assessments, is an off-duty police officer guarding the premises, no matter how, martial that appearance that provides. It's something that we have to have in this day and age.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Fox News alert as we look live outside of the Annunciation School there in Minneapolis. We are reporting the latest on this shooting at that school that left 3 dead, including the shooter, 17 injured. Many of them pediatric patients taken to area hospitals there. The shooter opened fire at 8:30 local time this morning at that Catholic school, killed 2 children, 17 others injured. The police chief there, Brian O'Hara, said the shooter was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, and approached the side of that church, shot through the windows toward the children sitting in their pews praying during a mass at the Catholic school. Joining us now is Chief Religion Correspondent Lauren Green. She is from Minnesota. And Lauren, we just can't fathom what has happened here.
Sandra, neither can I. My heart breaks for this community. This is an area I grew up in. I've driven there. I've worked there. I've driven past there. I went shopping there. So I know this community. This is like what Rachel Campos Duffy called a very, very wonderful, sweet little Catholic community. And Annunciation is one of the oldest in the country, the oldest certainly in the Minnesota area. It was founded in 1922. The school itself was founded a year later by Dominican nuns. So it's almost a century old. So this is deep, deep Catholic roots in the United States. One thing you should know about this community too, it's really working class. It's southwest Minneapolis. It's very close to the first ring suburb of Richfield, Minnesota. So it is sort of a working class, but upper middle class. But as I say, deep, deep spiritual Catholic roots. One thing you should know about the religious history of Minnesota is that it is mostly known for its Lutheran and Protestant populations. Its Lutherans probably make up the biggest population founded by German immigrants. But the Catholics were founded by Irish immigrants, and it's the second largest religious community in the area. In fact, the Basilica of St. Mary's is the first basilica of the United States. And the St. Paul Cathedral, one of the most impressive worldwide, is a national shrine designated by the Vatican. So this is deep, deep spiritual roots that are happening in this community. And the community is devastated. There's a lot of speculation going on among the sort of social media pages, which we can't report, but they are absolutely devastated. Sandra.
The police chief saying the shooting was a deliberate act of violence against innocent children, Lauren. He said, quote, "The sheer cruelty and cowardice firing into a church full of children is absolutely incomprehensible." And Lauren, thankfully, the area hospital, one of them that some of the victims were taken to, is a major trauma center and among the largest emergency room operations in the entire state.
Absolutely. Hennepin County Medical Center, it is a trauma unit. It is where you would mostly want to go if there are very traumatic accidents. All helicopters are coming in from all over, areas of bad vehicle crashes, that sort of thing. But yes, this is the area, this is the place you want to be in, and they are state-of-the-art medical procedures for any kind of trauma. So yes, this is exactly where you want it to be, and it's the incredible medical staff, incredibly well, of course, they're out of the University of Minnesota, which has one of the greatest medical schools in the world, not just in the country. So, I mean, I think this is the area where they're going to get the best treatment. But again, the religious community is devastated, and a lot of conflict, of course, within the religious community between the sort of liberal and conservative views about the Bible. But, you know, we don't know if this is a real targeted attack against the church, but we know that those kind of attacks have been growing. Sandra?
Sadly, from some of those neighbors who live nearby, who either have kids at this school or had kids in the school in the past, they are expressing, obviously, just absolute shock and sadness. And we pray for those who are in the hospital right now and those lives that have been lost. Lauren, thank you very much.
Sure.
What are officials saying? Because it sounds like Robin and Robert Westman, obviously two names, but one shooter using both of them, right?
Right, Jackie. This is a big update at the top of the hour. Our justice correspondent, David Spun, telling us that he's learned from his sources the identity of this shooter, a person who possibly goes by two names, Robert Westman or Robin Westman. And as Sandra mentioned, we'll have to see how city officials identify this person later on, as we expect to get more updates and news conferences. Minneapolis police last said about 2 hours ago that they were searching Westman's vehicle left behind in a nearby parking lot. Police believe the gunman fired from a rifle, shotgun, and a pistol, injuring more than a dozen and killing 2 children, ages 8 and 10. In the hours ahead, investigators will try to answer what, if any, connection the shooter had to Annunciation Catholic School. Here's what investigators have said so far.
Does not have an extensive known criminal history, and we are looking through information left behind to try and determine some type of motive. The question was, do we know if the shooter was a former school employee or a former student? We don't have that information.
This tragedy happened during a mass that was supposed to be celebrating the first week back at Annunciation Catholic School. In addition to the deaths, 17 other people were injured, 14 of whom are children. Minnesota Children's released a statement moments ago saying it received 7 pediatric patients. And some good news of this, one of those patients has been discharged. Another hospital system, Hennepin Healthcare, received the bulk of these victims. Earlier, they said its doctors successfully treated 11 patients. They just updated that total to 10 patients. And a spokesperson earlier today described the injuries his team had to treat.
You know, I can't get into specifics, but we are dealing with gunshot wound injuries from apparently a high-velocity weapon. And, you know, gunshot wounds can be very problematic because they can involve multiple body systems.
And as we closely follow updates with this tragedy, local outlets there on the ground are speaking with people who witnessed this up close. The Star Tribune said it spoke to a parent who has a 5th and 8th grader at the school. The outlet reports the parent saying, quote, "Both my kids have blood on them. It's just horrific, so cowardly. This person knew this was our first all-school mass of the year. It was obviously planned. This is the children's mass, not an advertised mass for the public," end quote. So we'll also be looking to see whether investigators address whether this shooter had any connection to this Catholic school and what he may have known leading up to his horrific actions. And I also want to point out that our Jackie Heinrich there with you, Sandra, reported earlier that Minnesota Governor Tim Walz spoke with President Trump, who offered his condolences, and Walz thanked him. I want to send it back over to you.
All right, CB, thank you.
This was their first day of all-school mass, so they have mass once a week on Wednesdays. And basically the way that it's set up is children and staff, they sit on the right side of the church. Then parents and other visitors who are just dropping in for mass, they sit on the left side. Mass is for an hour, and I guess it sounds like this happened at around 8:20, and mass starts at around 8.
All right, let's bring in former NYPD Lieutenant Darren Porcher for your thoughts on what we know so far. Hi, Darren.
Hi, this is a challenging narrative, to say the least. The one thing that we do know is the shooting began in the parking lot, which is quite similar to several school shootings that we've seen in the past. So it begs the question as to, should we have a standing police or I should say, armed presence outside of that school/church, which is apparent that that's something that we should have had. And, you know, it really rings volumes in that the shooter was firing through an opaque glass, which was the stained glass in the church. In essence, they created a target-rich environment to shoot as many people as possible. And then when we speak to the state of Minnesota, you need to be 21 years of age to acquire a handgun. So the handgun was clearly acquired illegally. So it begs the question as to how was the shooter able to acquire this handgun in the state of Minnesota, which prohibits purchasing that firearm under the age of 21.
Something we'll also be curious when we get our next update from the police chief is any record of any previous record, criminal record, that is, of the shooter. It was made clear in the news conference that they didn't seem to find anything, but as we discussed earlier, perhaps there was a juvenile record. There could have been, that we wouldn't know about. What did you make of that in the news conference?
I understood that, but I think what's more telling was a manifesto in play, and has law enforcement not provided this manifesto, which I can understand because this is an ongoing investigation. We're not looking to put someone in jail because a shooter has already committed suicide, but at the same token, we're looking to extract the teachable moments, which would greater fortify that school or any other school for that matter as we move forward. So in terms of it being a criminal background, I just don't think it's something that's significant, but I am concerned with, is there a possible psychological dysfunction in the background in the shooter, which would be quite telling if the shooter sat down with a therapist and the therapist was understanding that this was an individual with volatile tendencies that should have been checked appropriately.
Darren, obviously the start of a new school year. You've got to imagine schools all over the country right now are looking at, assessing, possibly reassessing their security measures. What can be learned from this?
You know, what's interesting about this being a religious organization of education, these traditionally don't happen here. Granted, in the past, we had the instance that occurred in Tennessee, but by and large, these types of shootings occur in public schools. And so the parents that have kids that go to this school probably figured, hey, look, you know what, this is a safe environment. I'm sending my children to a Christian school. So they're not going to be online what normally happens in a public school, and something like this happened. It was an aberration, but at the same token, we're going to have an after-action review that provides us the teachable moments how to best fortify that school. One component would be drones. Understand, the Archdiocese does not have the money that the public school system has. So they're somewhat limited in terms of the resources that they can introduce for security. But at the same token, this bears to be a necessity, not a nicety. So we need to move forward with the appropriate fortifications, such as drones, an armed security officer that would be outside of the school. Because when we saw what happened in Parkland as well as Uvalde, we had a shooter that began shooting from outside as they approached the building. So these are things that need to come into the mind of the individuals that are creating the security matrix in the school to ensure the safety of those children that will be attending the school in the future.
Darren, the live shot we have up is still outside of the school. You can see the police tape and the police activity, of course, the FBI on scene. Just a moment ago while you were talking, we had a shot up for a brief moment outside of the shooter's home. We did lose that shot. We'll try to get it back up again. But what we did see was police activity, quite a bit of activity outside the shooter's home. You would assume they're in there now. And just to remind everybody, the details of the shooter that we know so far, law enforcement officials are confirming to Fox News the two names of the shooter that have been used in the past, Robin Westman and Robert Westman. The officials saying that the shooter may have used both names, but they are now at the home of the shooter, Darren. How will they conduct their investigation in the home, Darren?
Well, one of the commonplace issues or pathways would be to establish a digital footprint, which your guests have come on and spoke to in the past as it relates to social media, computers, and the cell phone. That's going to be quite telling as to why was there any indicators that were emitted from the shooter prior to the shooting. Secondly, we really want to drill down to, as I mentioned in the earlier part, the manifesto, because this is not someone that had a tremendous criminal background. I genuinely believe that this was a statement as to why they committed this horrific act. In addition to that, we want to also find out, was the shooter either a student? What was the connective tissue with this, the shooter and this school? And that remains to be the million-dollar question as to why the shooter selected this specific premise as it resulted in this horrific carnage that we're speaking to today.
We know that those victims are still in the hospital and getting the care that they need. We hope we get an update on them shortly. Checking again, none right now, but hopefully soon. Darren, thank you for joining us on that.
Okay, joining us now is Pat Scallon. He's a parishioner at the church. He witnessed some of the terror and the chaos that unfolded this morning. I know it's incredibly difficult to talk, let alone talk on national TV about what you saw, but what do you feel comfortable sharing with us?
Yeah, well, it was a terrible, horrific situation. I got there right after, I assume after the shots. I didn't hear any as I approached the church, but I immediately went to the front of the church, and it was just then that people were coming out, mainly kids, and it was pretty chaotic. And I right away focused on two young girls that had been pretty seriously hurt. And then another boy that had looked like was brandished on his arm. And I kind of hung with them until the EMTs came, because they were obviously very distressed, and I was worried about their physical condition, and held the one girl's hand. She wanted me to do that. And they asked for their mom, and I reassured them and gave them comfort, but it was a terrible scene.
I don't know. Do you think that the people in the community, the moms and dads, the brothers and sisters, everybody, do you think it's going to be possible for them to live their lives going forward? You know, it strikes me listening to you talk that even the survivors today, are marked for life by this. If they are ever lucky enough to overcome the shock and the trauma, they're going to, be left with deep, deep scars for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Well, clearly we're in the moment of shock and distress, and it will take a while to heal, and this will never go away for the people that were there, and they'll always live with it. But remember, this is a community of faith and strength. I went to this school. My children went to this school. My dad went to this school. Wow. It's been a wonderful place. It has a lot of community spirit. It's a very positive place. They will, to the best they can, overcome this and survive it. And I know this school and church will live on, although unfortunately we'll never be able to forget. But I have the utmost faith and confidence in this wonderful community that I've lived in all my life, that we'll get past this. And again, I just hope, and I share with Sheriff Stanek, that we can continue to work on hopefully preventing these terrible situations from happening in the future. I never thought it would happen here in my neighborhood. And
no one ever does, Pat, those kids today were lucky that you live nearby. The community's lucky to have you. Thank you for doing this incredibly difficult thing, which is coming and talking to us today. It's very helpful for everybody to see and learn from this. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I have grandkids in school now, and I had kids there. I would have wanted somebody there with my kids. I did not want those kids to be alone for one single minute. So I'm glad I could help.
You did the right thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Breaking right now, FBI Director Kash Patel just posted on X, quote, "The FBI is investigating this shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. There were 2 fatalities, an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. In addition to those lives lost, 14 children and 3 adults have been injured. A bunch of them remain in critical condition. The shooter has been identified as Robin Westman. Born Robert Westman. The FBI is going to continue to provide updates on our ongoing investigation with the public as we are able. Let's go ahead and bring in retired NYPD Inspector Paul Morrow, an attorney, also a Fox News contributor. Paul, why do you think they are now pursuing this as an act of terrorism?
Look, they may have some indicia that there was this animus toward a particular religious group, which would make it a hate crime and potentially an act of terrorism if you have a mass shooting carried out for an ideological purpose. That is to say, if you get violence plus an ideological purpose, you get into the terrorism area. But let's be clear, at the federal level, you almost always need some connection to a foreign power. So the hate crime angle relative to this at the federal level is far more likely than it would be a terrorism case. But look, it's good that they're checking the boxing. It's good that they're looking at it that way. And they may have found something. You know, they may have had an interview with somebody who told them this, or they already got into the computer. There may be something there.
Could a terrorism designation kind of give the investigators more resources, or some kind of a benefit in pursuing, whatever information can be gleaned about this? Now that the guy's dead.
In a practical sense, in a case like this, it's unlikely that it's going to matter. In a terrorism case, the reason you want that designation as a terrorist entity is because what you get then is that anything that's done in furtherance of that terrorist group, let's just say it's Al-Qaeda for the sake of argument, right, in a different instance, then anything you do that's in furtherance of that, think of it as conspiracy. Anything that you're doing in furtherance of the group is chargeable. And so that's why you like that bigger designation, because it takes you into a sort of a group. And anything you're doing on behalf of the group, like a RICO charge, anything you're doing on behalf of this group ends up being chargeable. But again, at the federal level, and this is why I've been somebody, and people disagree with me on this, and reasonable minds can disagree. I get it, but I have often advocated that we should be looking hard at a domestic terrorism charge, which can be modeled on the state terrorism charges that do exist around the country. And that is simply violence for an ideological purpose. And you don't need necessarily a protected class like a religion or a particular ethnicity, but violence for an ideological purpose, that would get you to a terrorism charge. We don't have that, and so likely, I think, if the feds do charge here, it'll be more in the hate crime area, unless some fact that we don't know about now comes to light.
Well, and does any of this, not to be crude, but this guy is a murderer. He is now dead. Does it matter?
No. He's dead, so it doesn't really matter in terms of the investigation. Just to be blunt about it, like I said, unless he does end up getting linked to a group, and let's take the terrorism charge out. Let's say he ends up being linked to a domestic group, let's say a hate group. Well, then it does matter, because what it allows you to do then is to start to scrape into that group. You can make it a conspiracy. You can configure it as a group of people who look to do something like this. And what I've been name checking all day is the thing that we had out in California where that guy bombed the fertility clinic. I don't remember his name, and I don't want to say it anyway. But while that didn't end up being a group, we all went away thinking, okay, one and done. That case is over. The guy blew himself up and nothing else to worry about. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, they charge a second piece. They're going to go all the way on this because of how horrific it is. You can rest assured, federal, state, local, doesn't matter. They're going all the way.
I want to go ahead now and bring in correspondent Bill Malugin. He's been digging into the details all day. He has also covered many school shootings. It's an unenviable beat to be on. But Bill, Trey Gowdy pointed out on our air earlier today that it seems over and over and over again, these mass shooters are young American men, usually in their 20s.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. We don't really know why, but that's the profile that's being fit in this one as well. Just looking at some of the information we're getting about the shooter here, identified as Robin Westman. Fox News obtaining the paperwork that back in 2019, his parents filed in the state of Minnesota to allow him to change his name from Robert to Robin, and on that paperwork it specifically said it's because he identified as female, so that was the reason for that name change. But you talk about like the profile of these young guys committing these shootings, that certainly does seem to be the case pretty much every time we have one of these high-profile ones. It was the case in Uvalde, which I covered a few years ago. It was the case in Sandy Hook. Now, thankfully, it doesn't appear this incident's going to be as bad, but you look at some of the things that are floating around online right now in terms of some of the writings. There's that manifesto flying around. We're obviously talking about a very sick individual here. It's going to take a while to figure out what, if any, motive there was here. You guys have been talking about the FBI, how they're announcing they're going to potentially investigate this as domestic terrorism, and rightfully so. This shooter apparently knew these kids were going to be there en masse, in class, at that time of the day, and just decided to post up outside with 3 weapons, as we found out. The police saying he came with a rifle, with a shotgun, and with a handgun. And I've been listening to the sound bites of those children witnesses. You have a 10-year-old kid saying that how terrifying it was to have bullets come flying through the stained glass. You had the one little boy say his friend Victor laid on top of him to protect him, took a round. I mean, think about it. A little boy potentially taking a high-velocity round from a rifle, being shot at from a nut job in a parking lot. He's one of the boys in the hospital recovering right now. And at the end of the day, 2 young children dead, Jillian, ages 8 and 10, 17 others injured, 14 of which are children. Again, you were texting me about this earlier, and it's a perspective that's worth talking about. It's first week of school for these kids. This is the last thing they should be worrying about. They should be meeting friends and meeting their teachers and having a good time. But this person, for whatever reason, we'll see what the investigation plays out, just decided to show up to that parking lot, post up outside, and just start firing dozens of rounds into that church. And again, what we've heard from the witnesses is it was just pretty nonstop. We heard the witness this morning describing it as they thought somebody was working on their roofing nearby because the bang, 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 bang was just so nonstop. It's just yet another horrific incident. It's unfortunate we have to keep dealing with these every now and then, and it just makes it so much worse when it's a school involving young children, Jillian. I mean, these kids are so innocent, and here we go again, whether it's Sandy Hook, Uvalde, a school like this. You have these elementary-aged kids. You hear the innocence in their voice when they're interviewed by the media, and it's just hard to watch something like that, especially watching the parents show up. Like when I was at Uvalde, it was so hard because there were parents coming up to us, the media, asking us what information we had and holding up pictures saying, have you seen my little boy? Have you seen my little girl? Can you put it on the news right now? Can you get it out there? And you just see the panic in their faces. And watching the live shots that we've been doing all day long, you see that, right? Especially, Paul and I were on set together earlier this morning when the parents were first starting to show up, and you can see the panic in their eyes. You can see them looking for their kids. You can see the relief on their faces when they're able to find their kids and bring them out. Imagine being one of those parents who showed up and wasn't immediately able to find their child, or didn't know what hospital they're at, or didn't know what happened to them. It's just horrible stuff. So I understand we're waiting for the press conference with Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. Last check we got is that is running about 5 to 10 minutes behind. So we have that live shot popped up for our viewers in the bottom right of the screen. We'll wait for them to come out, and we'll see what kind of new developments we get, what, if any, further details we get on this shooter now, as the rest of these children and some of the adults who are injured are still recovering, Jillian.
We are indeed awaiting another news update. We're hoping to hear from the governor, Tim Walz, potentially law enforcement officials, health officials there in the county. Let's go ahead and play that sound you referenced, Bill. A 10-year-old who was on scene today saw his friends get injured. It's incredibly difficult to watch, but guess what? We're going to play it because it's important that people see what is going on. Listen.
My friend ran, someone helped him run out. He saw him. He was wearing all all black, and he had a ski mask on. I was down, so I didn't really look up. I mean, he got shot through the stained glass windows. My friend Victor, he was like laying on top of me, like making sure I was safe, and he got hit. So that was really brave of him.
All right, let's bring in Ted Williams, former DC homicide detective, also a defense attorney and a Fox News contributor. I don't know, Ted, what do you say to something like that?
You know, Jillian, is just so chilling to hear that young child. That young child, as many of the children that was on this scene, are going to be traumatized by this incident the rest of their life. But let's just look at what happened here. This was a planned, targeted, cold-blooded killing by this guy, Westman. Without a doubt, when you think about it, when he took two 2x4s, blocked the doors, so individuals who were in that mass praying could not get out, that says a great deal about what he had up his sleeves. He knew that he wanted to maximize carnage in that mass. I think you're going to find as part of the investigation that he has some familiarity with that Catholic school, when they were going to have mass, and how he could bring about shooting as many and killing as many as he possibly could.
Paul, I said it earlier in the show. I mean, this bears some striking resemblance to the Nazi pogroms that they carried out in occupied, parts of France and other countries in Western Europe during World War II. Outside of that, I have not personally been exposed to anything like this. What do you make of the idea that, this was an indiscriminate shooting? Do you think that what we know at this moment, which is that he fired from outside the church, substantiate that? Want to flag for our viewers, we see Governor Walz coming out to the sticks. Hopefully he's going to give us an update, but Paul, talk to us until he gets there.
Well, look, one of the things that we can definitely go to, as Ted says, is that this was quite targeted. There's some reporting out from the New York Post and other outlets that perhaps he had a relative who worked at the school at some point. These facts are all going to emerge, but let's just say that it almost certainly was not an accident that he went there. And what came to my mind, we said it earlier when Bill Malusian and I were on the air together, was the Nashville event. And we had far fewer facts at that point, but this bears a lot of resemblance to that. And we very well may find, as part of the manifesto or whatever comes out relative to this thing, that he is inspired or was inspired by that. He's a copycat. And we have to be mindful of that going forward, because let's just make sure we're all cognizant that copycats exist.
County Sheriff and Minnesota Department of Public Safety Commissioner. Sir, thanks for taking time with us today. That suspect now has a considerable criminal history.
Yeah, three things come to mind, three words: reprehensible, coward, and the third one, honestly, you can't say on the air. But it's unbelievable that this happens 8:30 in the morning during a church service for young kids, their first week of school, celebrating, getting together. And then this guy does what he does. I've seen, as I'm sure you've seen, on X, this supposed manifesto, a video of the suspected shooter, laying out his weapons, talking about what he was going to do and why he was going to do it. Unbelievable.
It's a shock to the conscience, but in some respects not surprising, given that there was another shooting in the county at a nearby school just the day before.
Not just in the county, less than 2 miles away, less than 20 hours before, a guy got out of a vehicle, opened fire with a semi-automatic weapon, shot 6 people, one of them dead. It happened at 1:30 in the afternoon in broad daylight in a busy intersection in Minneapolis. And then you have this 20 hours later, 17 people shot, 2 young children dead. The community's in chaos. mean, you have to look at this and say, what is going on? Failed leadership, governor, mayor, elected officials, the police movement, which thank God got defeated for the most part, but we're still reeling from the after effects. That police department in Minneapolis is trying to do the best job they can every single day, but they're at half staff. Half staffing still 4 years later.
What do you say, sir, to the kids, the families of the kids, the families of the adults who have been hurt today? I mean, where do you start?
Yeah, Jillian and folks watching this, I grew up in that city. I spent 40 years of my professional life in public safety, both as a Minneapolis police officer and elected county sheriff. I was born and raised not far from where this happened. I went to a Catholic school. I went to church in the morning, the first class of the day at the elementary school I went to. For the parents and the kids and others watching out there, you got to have faith. You got to have hope. Things will turn around, but not until the community gets engaged, not until the elected officials get engaged and hear from them. This is just unbelievable what's happening. 2 of these shootings, 20 hours apart. The other one doesn't even get any mention at the press conference today at the scene of the school shooting, rightfully so. No one can compare that to the shooting of these young kids. And keep in mind, it appears this was planned out very well. Again, the video I saw, the manifesto I saw on X, multiple 30-round magazines for that semi-automatic weapon, a pistol, a semi-automatic handgun, a tactical shotgun. And he was good to go. A smoke grenade, barricading doors from the outside. So if the kids wanted to get out, they couldn't even get out. They were trapped in there, victims.
A lot like the tactics used by Nazis in Western Europe during World War II when they occupied parts of France and burned people alive in locked churches. How does somebody like this in this community who is clearly so deeply perverted and disturbed go unnoticed and purchase firearms?
Yeah, well, we're going to find out more as the investigation continues. It's hard because you're only, 8-9 hours into it at this point. They're going to ask all those tough questions. The FBI, the ATF, Minneapolis Police, Hennepin County Sheriff. Maybe as people have suggested, maybe it's time for the National Guard to be dispatched into Minneapolis to help patrol the streets until this police department can regain control of the streets themselves and hold them as they should be. It doesn't do any good to go in and eradicate a problem if you're not going to continue on with the eradication and stop the crime from happening. We don't want to be on the front page of the news every other week here in Minneapolis. It's ridiculous. And like I said, reprehensible, cowardice, all the way around. Elected officials, take notice. They have a hand in this.
I think all Americans today, or adults anyway, bear some kind of responsibility for this crisis in the nation. Sir, I have a 4-year-old who's starting grade school tomorrow. My husband and I, for a few weeks, have been stressed, very stressed about, getting her school supplies. And is she going to like her new teacher? Is she old enough for this? And, I've been worried about the wrong things because it turns out what I should have been worried about was if she's going to get gunned down alongside with her friends inside school. It's so perverse.
It is really a sad state of affairs to think that parents have to think about these things, you and your 4-year-old and others. But, keep in mind that while they practice their active shooting drills, which no one thought we'd have to do after the 50s and 60s and the civil defense drills we had to go through back then during the Cold War, now we practice active shooter drills. The young 10-year-old boy said, you know what? We didn't practice it in church. That's a safe haven. That's someplace where this doesn't happen, but here it is. It's happened again. in a church. They were worshiping in the pews. There was no place for them to go, no place for them to shelter or hide, no one there to protect them. I'm sure the staff did an admirable job, but it's really tough.
Rich, thank you so much for taking time with us. Let's listen to the governor.
Certainly a day and a news conference that no one wants to be at. A community behind us, Annunciation Church and School, committed to academics, service, and Catholic values, filled with the first days of school of beautiful children going to learn those values, share with their teachers and their classmates. And instead of that joy and that curiosity and that learning, they were met with evil and horror and death. And we often come to these and say, these unspeakable tragedies, or there's no words for this. There shouldn't be words for these types of incidents because they should not happen. And there's no words that are going to ease the pain of the families today. On behalf of all the people of Minnesota, our deepest sympathies. A wish that any of these words would make what you're feeling now better, but it won't. A place that's founded on community, founded on service, founded on family. I'd like to give special thank you to the mayor and the team in Minneapolis, Minneapolis Police Department, Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, Minnesota State Patrol, the BCA, so many agencies, our federal partners in the FBI, the first responders, and the heroic work that's happening now as we speak at multiple medical locations, including Hennepin County Medical Center, where most of our children were transported to receive the life-saving care. The thoughts and prayers and the hopes and the support that we need to give them in this moment, too, is critical. Speaking with all the people here and grateful to our federal partners, Senator Klobuchar speaking early this morning and receiving a call from President Trump, who was with his leadership team of the Attorney General and the Vice President, expressing their deep condolences amongst the horror that happened and an offer to provide the support to the folks here in Minnesota of what's needed. So a lot of cameras here, and unfortunately we have been through these types of things. They will be gone at some point. All of you, you have to do your jobs. But what happened here today will not be gone. Minnesotans will not step away. We'll stand with this community. We'll redouble ourselves to do the best we can to understand what we can do to prevent any parent from having to receive the calls they received today, from any school dedicated to children having to respond to a situation that, as we said, is unthinkable, but that's all too common, not just in Minnesota, but across this country. It's Minnesota's day today, and it's my strongest desire that no state, no community, no school ever experiences a day like this. So I ask the rest of the folks around the country who are watching, keep us in your thoughts and prayers, but also keep us in the thoughts for action. Keep us in the ideas that we can work together. And it's on these days like this, I think, and I hope we can hold on to it. We are unified as a community. Everybody across the country today is part of the Annunciation Parish, and they're with those families. With that, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey.
Thank you, Governor. Throughout the morning, we have seen this extraordinary Minneapolis family step up in thousands of different ways. People with strength, resilience, compassion, and love for the families that have been forever impacted by this heinous act. We want to make sure that we're doing everything possible for them right now, and I want to give a special thank you, and we are so grateful to all of the faculty and the teachers at Annunciation. The way that they acted during severe threat and danger was nothing short of heroic. This is a tragic and horrible event that should never occur, and it would have been all the more tragic and horrible had they not stepped in, at times perhaps put themselves in danger to protect others. As horrible as this has been, it could have been far worse. I'm grateful for our law enforcement partners, our police officers in the Minneapolis Police Department and other law enforcement agencies well beyond that step up, that answered the call to make sure that they were running towards danger when so many of the rest of us would have run in the other direction. Thank you. We are so appreciative of your service. To Principal DeBoer and your whole team, the ethic that you have showed, the love that you've shown, it's flat out incredible. And at the same time, look, we need to be doing more than talking. It can't just be words. There needs to be action. And when we have seen school shooting after school shooting, when we have seen churches get shot up by horrible actors, I think the impetus has to be on all of us as leaders to do a whole lot more, to recognize that we've got more guns in this country than we have people. And it's on all of us to recognize the truth and the reality that we can't just say that this shouldn't happen again and then allow it to happen again and again beyond that. It's on all of us. And I have heard about a whole lot of hate that's being directed at our trans community. Anybody who is using this as an opportunity to villainize our trans community or any other community out there has lost their sense of common humanity. We should not be operating out of a place of hate for anyone. We should be operating from a place of love for our kids. Kids died today. This needs to be about them. This needs to be wrapping our arms around these families with every bit of love that we can possibly show. And I know that our Minneapolis family and well beyond is prepared to do exactly that. And so my message to everyone out there is, again, these families are experiencing some acute pain right now. But don't just think of these as somebody else's kids. Think of your own. Let's make sure that we're acting now to not just say it's never happening again, but ensure it doesn't. Our chief of police has been working tirelessly throughout the day, along with, again, a number of different law enforcement agencies, investigators, federal partners, state partners. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar, for being here. Been working tirelessly, and I'd like to invite him up to give some more of the details that have come up.
Welcome back. A tragic day in Minnesota after the deadly school shooting at the Annunciation Catholic School. Tonight, the community is holding a prayer vigil at Holy Angels Gym. It's going to honor the two children who were killed, ages 8 and 10. 7 remain in critical condition. Although the motive is unclear, the FBI is investigating this shooting as an act of domestic terrorism and hate crime, apparently targeting Catholics. According to police, the suspect was armed with a rifle, a shotgun, 2 pistols, and is believed to have fired all 3 from outside the church before dying from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the parking lot. Police have identified both the shooter and his mother, who was at one time an employee of the school. And court documents reveal the suspect was transgender and went by 2 names, Robert and Robert Westman. You can see on your screen the affidavit filled out by his mother suggesting the name change order is requested because the subject identifies as female. Let's bring in retired FBI supervisory agent now, James Gagliano. James, thanks for being with us here today. There's a lot of detail. We've heard from both the police today and the recognition that there was a manifesto uploaded to YouTube that has now been taken down. It's roughly 11 minutes. I've reviewed that manifesto, both the video and print versions of that manifesto. A lot of stuff written on his weapons, a lot of hate directed in a lot of directions at Jews, at BlackRock at Donald Trump. How do you make sense of all of this when trying to understand the motives of the shooter?
Well, first of all, Will, in watching the press conference, it seemed that the authorities there in Minneapolis are kind of being careful in what they wanted to say there. The FBI has already come out and said that this was an act of domestic terrorism, and it is being treated as a hate crime. Why is that important for the listener? Why is that so important to understand what the motivations are? Well, what we're finding out is in most of these mass shootings, and Will, whether it's somebody from the far left and radical Islamist, or somebody on the far right, or somebody like this that appears to be somebody that was going through a transition, there are people that become grievance collectors. They find a slight, something that they hear a politician say, something that bothers them. They hear some type of policy is being put forth, and that appears what this was, somebody that had a lot of grievances against a lot of different groups and ideologies, and then acted out tragically this morning in a Minneapolis church.
Those grievances are well on display in what we've seen from Robert Westman. At times in his letter to his parents, if that is to be confirmed and authenticated, he's almost apologetic for what he is about to do and the effect it will have on their lives. And yet he's unyielding that he's going to do something horrific. He talks about bills. He talks about people. He talks about injustice in America. But then alternatively, James, there's the video, and it is almost DC comic Marvel villainesque in that he puts on voices, shows off an arsenal of weapons, and as I mentioned, writes things on these weapons like "Kill Donald Trump," sponsored by BlackRock. He has a smoke canister where he writes "Jew gas." You know, he does have a sticker, to your point on the transition, where he has a trans flag emblazoned with an AK-47 that says "Defend Equality." There's just a lot going on here. And it may never be possible to get inside the mind of an insane person. But if we're to find out why this keeps happening, that seems to be our task, the task of the FBI.
Yeah, the question is going to be this, Will. Were there any red flags, obviously, that were missed? Look, we live in an open and free society. We don't live under martial law. People can say things. People can speak out. And the web, the internet, is such a dark, deep, vast place. It's impossible for us to police everything that's said, everything that's uploaded. In an instance like this, the question is going to come in the next couple of days as we go through this and try to piece this together. Were there obvious cries for help or signs? Obviously, the weapons we understand were purchased legally, so that's not going to be an angle. But had there been any type of mental illness in this person's background or history? Were there any incidents of violence in the past? And that's the problem, Will. We live in a country of 327 million people, 400 million guns. We cherish our Second Amendment. Nobody wants to take away guns from God-fearing, law-abiding citizens. But how do we keep them out of the hands of somebody like this? I agree. I watched the video that you walked. It was macabre to watch just the level of deviancy there. And again, it goes back to this. Most mass shooters, young males, this man was 22 years old, young males who are disaffected, disenfranchised. They feel cut off from society for whatever reason, and they have to find a scapegoat.
That is true, and that is true often in these cases, James. But there is another layer and another wrinkle to this particular case that is reminiscent of Nashville, and that is you bring up mental health. Part of Robert Westman's mental health picture is gender dysphoria, gender identity, transgender. And I wonder if we don't have to start figuring out whether or not that condition is being handled the right way society-wide. If we see this disaffected nature, and at times, as you point out, collection of grievances, is the way we are handling this issue as a society one that is making everyone healthier or pushing everyone deeper into the consequences of insanity?
I think it's absolutely something worth looking at, and I think it's something that should be explored. Now that we've gotten away from this timing where you can't talk about things because, you know, it's not politically correct, or it's, you know, we're out of that area right now.
Right.
Are pumping people full of hormones something that could cause this? I don't know, and it's something that should be explored.
And political correctness cannot keep us from pursuing the truth when the truth is the answer to why we keep ending up in these horrible, evil situations. We simply cannot be bowed by the fear of running politically incorrect. We must be bold pursuers of the truth. I appreciate you doing that with me today, James. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.